But it just was nice that just say that.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation from Deacon Ken Caponelli from St. John's in Shoes Landing. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Almighty God and Heavenly Father, send down upon those who hold office here in Gloucester Township the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people and watch over all those here at this meeting. Grant them the opportunity to speak their mind and to have their questions answered. Lord, thank you for your help, for your guidance tonight. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. This regular meeting of the Township Council is being held in accordance with the schedule of meetings of the Township Council established and adopted by the Township Council, which schedule designated the time, date, and place of this meeting. Adequate public notice of this meeting has been provided pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. We are using an electronic amplifying and recording device, and in order to obtain an audible and clear record, we request that all those wishing to speak be recognized and state your name and address directly into the microphone. The recording device is to be solely utilized by the Township Clerk's Office for the preparation of the minutes and shall be the official record of the Township Council meetings. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hutchison.
Present.
Ms. Grace. Here. Mr. Mignon.
Here.
Mrs. Stubbs.
She's out.
Mrs. Winters.
Here.
Mrs. Strato.
Here.
Mr. Mercado.
He is on vacation.
Mr. Barlamere.
Here.
Mr. Cardis.
Here.
Mr. Petrangelo.
Here.
Chief Harkins.
Here.
Mr. Chadwell.
Here.
We will now have the first public portion. This is for agenda items only. Anyone addressing council may speak for 3 minutes for a total public portion of 15 minutes. Anyone for the first public portion? Seeing none, I close the first public portion. proclamation.
Supporting the Drive Sober, Get Pulled Over 2022 statewide Labor Day crackdown. Whereas approximately 1/3 of all fatal traffic crashes in the United States involve impaired drivers. And whereas impaired driving crashes killed 11,654 people in the United States in 2020. And whereas impaired driving crashes cost the United States almost $44 billion a year. And whereas during the past 5 years, New Jersey's roadways experienced 33,798 crashes and 662 fatalities involving impaired drivers. And whereas an enforcement crackdown is planned to combat impaired driving, and whereas the end of summer Labor Day period is traditionally a time for social gatherings, which include alcohol. And whereas the State of New Jersey Division of Highway Traffic Safety has asked law enforcement agencies throughout the state to participate in the Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over 2022 statewide Labor Day crackdown. And whereas the project will involve increased impaired driving enforcement from August 19th, 2022 through September 5th, 2022. And whereas an increase in impaired driving enforcement and a reduction in impaired driving will save lives on our roadways. Now therefore be it resolved that the Township of Gloucester declares its support for the Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over 2022 statewide Labor Day crackdown from August 19th, 2022 through September 5th, 2022, and pledges to increase awareness of the dangers of driving while impaired by alcohol or drugs.
Thank you. Bid report.
2022 New Jersey Department of Transportation Municipal Aid reconstruction of Johnson Road Phase 2.
Do I have a motion?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Hutchison?
Yes.
Ms. Grace?
Yes.
Mr. Mignon?
Yes.
Mrs. Winters? Yes. Mrs. Strato?
Yes.
Cherrywood Road Improvement Program Phase 10.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Roll call.
Mr. Hutchison?
Yes.
Ms. Grace?
Yes.
Mr. Mignon?
Yes.
Mrs. Winters? Yes. Mrs. Strato?
Yes. Before we go on to the ordinance of second reading, we do have an item that needs a straw poll. Mr. Petrangelo, if you'd like to come up and kind of give us an overview about map updates for Gloucester Township.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to discuss with you tonight. Coordinating with Jake from Triad, we need to update our Rossi report for the Green Acres in order to obtain the funding for our open space grants. We have as you know, we have the planned incentive grants. Part of the requirements for that is to update and improve our current existing Rossi form. So the Rossi is a recreation open space inventory. It lists all of our open space properties. It has not been updated since 2007. We're in the process of updating that, and we've submitted a proposal to work with Triad in order to finalize that mapping and get it up to DEP Green Acres for their review and approval. As you know, these are key to be important. These documents have to be accurate. If property is accidentally included on there, it automatically becomes under Green Acres control. The only way to get it off will be through a diversion. So this is a process that we have to take a lot of time and effort for. It has to be detailed and accurate. The goal that we're working on right now is to be able to present the document to the planning board at the planning board's September 20th meeting. Planning board will then endorse it and come back here at your 26th meeting. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Anybody? Great. We just
Thank you.
need to do a straw poll on this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Hutchison?
Yes.
Ms. Grace?
Yes.
Mr. Mignon?
Yes.
Mrs. Winters? Yes. Mrs. Strato?
Yes. Okay. We now have the first ordinance for second reading. We will have a public hearing. This is O-22-11, ordinance of the Township of Gloucester, County of Camden, and State of New Jersey, amending ordinance O-03-03, land development regarding home occupations and violation and penalty fees. So we will have an open.
Councilwoman Toronto, I'd like to make a motion to amend, remove the word public assembly from this ordinance.
Okay,
So the ordinance 02211 shows number 3 on the first page, I, you're going to take out and or involving public assembly.
Yes.
What will remain is the prohibition for backyard and pool rentals.
and that's the only place that appears,
That's the only
right?
place it appears. That's really, plus the penalties, really meant to that.
Okay, so we'll amend that. We take a vote just
You need
to
vote,
amend,
yeah, you need a roll call vote. Everyone's in
and
favor.
then we'll do the public portion on that.
This
Okay,
is a minor amendment, so it doesn't require going back out the first reading. It's not substantive to the law. Hopefully everybody seconded.
no, we didn't, yeah, we didn't.
Second.
May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Hutchison,
Yes.
Ms. Grace.
Yes.
Mr. Mignon.
Yes.
Mrs. Winters.
Yes.
Mrs. Strada.
Yes,
So that's amended to eliminate and or involving public assembly. Just creates backyard and pool rentals.
thank you. And we'll now have the public portion on that. Anyone with, Paul?
Evening, Council. Paul Krug, Blackwood Estates. First of all, thank you, Councilman Mignon, for making that motion to remove public assembly. To that specific point, I went home after our discussion on this topic and read through a little bit more of, because this is a subsection underneath the housing occupancy ordinance, and public assembly is actually mentioned higher in a section higher than this particular subsection with regard to housing occupation. And so what I had trouble understanding is it did not, I think, adequately explain what public assembly meant on your private property. And the other thing that came to my mind was private property, public assembly. Wouldn't it be a private assembly on private property? So I don't know if it's possible through this ordinance subsection right here to actually go up a level from this subsection, but I think it should be looked at because it certainly, if we're going to remove it here, it being in a higher section doesn't make any sense either. Mr. Carlemere, I don't know about that.
The only thing I could say, that could be taken a look at, but it was my drafting of the prohibition home occupation, adding backyard and pool rentals. And as we were putting it in, just kind of thinking of any way that anyone could try to move around renting of a backyard or a pool was calling it something else. And that's why we came up with trying to say involving the public assembly. So it really was trying to identify any pool rentals and public assemblies associated with it. So, and it kind of created confusion from comments that we heard at last meeting. And I spoke to council president a few times and said, give some thought if we can come up with a different language identifying public assembly, but the kind of thought was, let's see how council feels. Now there's a motion one, I guess, resulting from conversation.
Yeah, first of all, let me say I appreciate you taking the comments from citizens and working them into this. I will say, unfortunately, still all in all, I think I'm against this. And let me explain why. We have what is an isolated incident of bad actors, right? Folks who are not showing the type of neighborly respect that each of us hope to have from our neighbors. But these individuals are in the process of having their day in court. They've already been brought on, nuisance charges, traffic charges, noise ordinance violations. So this situation is being handled. And so I don't think we need redundant regulation in order to take care of one bad apple, especially at the expense of tax-paying, law-abiding citizens who may want to utilize their pool, like I suggested on poolshare.com, to in a reasonable manner, make some money off of a private asset on private land. And so what we have here between these two ordinances is that a citizen could be fined up to $4,000 because you're prohibiting it. So they could be fined up to $2,000 for that. And then if they didn't have a mercantile license, they could be fined up to another $2,000 for that. So $4,000 in total potential fines for utilizing a private asset on their private land. So I have to stick with the fact that I recognize that we have an extreme isolated incident, but I don't believe that incident is being taken care of, and I don't believe that we need to affect 65,000 other citizens who are operating with the type of neighborly respect we all expect. So I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, did you want to add anything to what Mr. Krug said?
Certainly. So just to inform council, since the last reading of this ordinance, we've had to investigate. We have two other incidents, one on Brantley Way this past Saturday, over 200 people at homeowner charging $10 cover to get in the yard, use the pool. Also at 7 Charter Oak in the Millbridge development, had another over 150 people in Millbridge homes on Charter Oak. That was the previous Saturday. That was the week after it was first read. Again, took every officer that we had on duty to respond there to make sure that it safely got dispersed. It is an ongoing trend. We found flyers where I believe the Charter Oak home was charging $20 a person, probably had liquor being served and whatnot. Again, we had no prior notice of whatnot. It also took Public Works to respond out there with at least 2 litter crews just to try and get the street cleaned up, the trash picked up. So I would disagree that it's considered a isolated. That's 3 major incidents that we've had probably within the last month that we've been dealing with, and the trend continues. Again, very tense situations, trying to disperse people from a residential neighborhood. Tense in the way that the neighbors are becoming very angry and very confrontational, as you might imagine if it was in your neighborhood that this was going on. People urinating and doing things on properties that are next door because the people attending the parties are not from the residents. They're not from the area. The parking is just outrageous. Brantley Way, it's going all the way out to Peter Cheeseman Road parking, and then people walking in the street. It's a very dangerous situation, and we don't become aware of it until neighbors sometimes call us and say, hey, what's going on here? And then we investigate it. And even charging, maintaining a nuisance is a very low municipal ordinance violation, and we have to really be able to prove the nuisance that they're maintaining. Just charging money at the door doesn't meet the criminal violation of maintaining a nuisance. What we've done so far is we've referred these to zoning. That's what you're voting on tonight, so that we collect evidence and refer it to zoning. So that zoning, code enforcement, those, they're not law enforcement agencies, they're civil agencies that do the investigating, and they determine the outcome of, charging. And we've had success. We've had the health department go to both of these locations. Again, today we were working on the one that happened Saturday night, but the other location, we had officers, we had code enforcement, zoning, and the health department go out to provide a warning to the people that had the party last week. And we're doing the same thing this week, trying to make it clear to them that this is not something that we can handle here. It's just not meant for those types of residential neighborhoods. So I'm moving any. Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you, Chief. Anyone else? Brian?
Good evening, Council. Brian Burns, Saulwood Drive, Ariel. With regard to this particular ordinance, I'm sitting here thinking, how did the number $2,000 come up with for the fine? Because if these people are bringing in $4,000, $6,000, whatever it might be, they could say, who cares? I'll pay the $2,000 and I'll keep on doing it. So I'm just curious where the $2,000 came from, and if the Public Works Department has to go out and clean up the mess, that's additional money that's put on the township. So where did the $2,000 come from?
If I may.
Sure.
So, this was, our municipal prosecutor was brought into that process. I think it's, I believe it's up to $2,000 per day. Okay, that they're operating as a business, in their yard, in their property, so they multiple. But it gives our, what it was $500. And my argument was that that's a business expense for these people, as you're saying. They were clearly, paying the fines and not really caring because they're raking in that much money. So we did comparables to other towns, to give our judge, again, remember, the judge can set it, it's up to $2,000. The judge can give a warning, he can decide nothing, he can go all the way up to the max if he feels the violation. So we took the word of our municipal prosecutor, Mr. Long, and he made that recommendation. It seemed reasonable in comparison to other towns. That was right where everybody else was. That's how we got to the number.
It just might have more teeth if you raise the fine.
It's certainly something we would consider, and we would certainly come back if it doesn't, I would make that recommendation to council if this doesn't help dissuade this type of thing going on.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Dawn Sabella, Choose Landing Road. I had a question regarding this. If you go onto I think it's called swimply.com, there's about a dozen Gloucester Township residents that are part of that for, renting their pools out. And they all seem to be self-governing. The limit they've given is up to 20 people. I don't know what Swimply's limit is, but I searched all the way up to 60 and nobody went that high. So I'm just wondering, for the sake of the current residents that are following the rules, they are just trying to make a little extra money, especially, given the times. Is there a way to put maybe a number cap on this? Maybe 20 is the limit, since that seems to be the upper threshold that our citizens are choosing, instead of just for everybody blanketedly getting charged, based on just because they rented and they're not causing a nuisance.
It's the judge's discretion whether it's $1 penalty or no penalty or 2,000. It's the judge's discretion, and he will weigh the facts, as any municipal court judge or any judge should do, as to the circumstances that is beforehand. If he feels that 2,000 is too extreme under the circumstances, he'll go for less money. It says not to exceed $2,000.
Right, but I'm talking about a person count. If somebody has an event that only has up to 20 people and it's not impacting the neighborhood.
That's a fact that the court can decide. If you only had 20 people, the court might impose a lesser fine. If you had 400 people, the court could impose, I would think, the maximum fine. So, and all the other surrounding circumstances, if you're sitting as a municipal court judge, that's what you would weigh those facts.
And that's called.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't think 20 people, that's like family or something, so I don't think that would.
That's what I'm
I've never been
saying.
made aware of an incident with
Yeah.
20 people. I mean,
Right.
we're not actively, I can say the police department's not actively looking for those types of things.
Yeah.
But when we get contacted, about them, we do investigate them. Again, not always an easy thing to prove. It's one of those things is whether, but I would call into question whether, the people in Swindler are getting a mercantile license to have that, or, making sure that they have lavatory facilities. This is the concerns that the health department has. Is proper testing happening on the pools? We became very well educated from the health department about all the testing that goes into, say, the township's municipal. I am aware of that. The amount of testing that goes on into that to make sure that the water's safe and whatnot. And when you start to run a business by renting it out, it starts to cross into the health concerns as to whether they are using proper chemicals and things like that. So on the surface, while many people are just renting it to try and make more money or whatever it is, it does bring up these kinds of concerns. And, when we get contacted, we find that oftentimes we get contacted for the bigger parties.
Right.
And I can't say that we respond out or checking ones that are being rented, because quite frankly, that's not a police department function. We're dealing with disorderly conduct type of situation. So, I understand your point, but when you delve into the issues, the health issues, there's a whole lot more to look for. Lavatories, things like that, even.
Is there a similar ordinance regarding Airbnbs? Like what if one of these, people ended up renting just a house for the night?
I know that I've spoke to the administration about looking at some of those types of things, because that is a trend that happens. Not so much, we haven't, but we've had them in surrounding areas. I know Washington Township has had a great deal of situations where Airbnbs have been rented for the night, and bad incidents have happened and the neighborhood gets negatively impacted. I think what it comes down to for council is whether we want to have these types of situations going on in our neighborhoods. Do we want to regulate them? In my experience, again, it's just my opinion, I have found that the neighbors do not want this type of thing of people just coming in, pouring into a private residence, depending on a normal residential lot in most of the neighborhoods that we have, that creates concerns for them.
Yeah, I totally understand. I'm just trying to see if there's a balance
I
to
understand.
still
No, I-
support those
I get
that, aren't in the mix. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Smithman?
Hello, good evening, council. My name is Shaughnessy Smithman. I live in the SDK Millbridge Gardens apartment complex, apartment 341. I don't quite understand the jargon for what the vote is here. It seems as though people are renting out their homes and they're not properly being regulated. From what I understand, at the last meeting, Chief Harkins mentioned that someone had died. There was like a shooting, someone died, and then there was a lot of litter. Public Works had to be called in.
Washington Township had a shooting incident. No one died at the incident, but it was a similar type of situation.
I grew up also in Gloucester County, in Monroe Township. If council needs anything to compare to, back in the early 90s, or actually late 80s, when I was a child, my older sister used to throw parties when my parents were not home. I was the younger sibling. While she did not charge, it was apparently quite the hangout. I used to tell on her. In order to avoid that, they started to drug me with her friend's psychiatric medication and alcohol. They used to put it in my juice. Years later, they thought it was funny, trying to remind me of that. There was no police called. The neighbor next door, when they grew old enough, they began to do the same thing. The parking filled up the neighborhood, the very small, quaint neighborhood. It was filled with parking. I don't know if there was any gunshot or what have you, but those houses all eventually became abandoned. It was not a good precedence to be set. I don't know what went on at those city council meetings in Monroe Township. Shamefully, I did not attend. But anything that the people that do observe and respond to these calls should be listened to wisely. While it may not have a precedence for what to take caution of without taking away people's civil liberties, I myself purchased pictures for my son when he was born. Somebody came door to door. There was Tupperware. My mom bought a vacuum cleaner from Kirby. There was several things what people did to make profit, but then there was also damage that was done. If you could just keep that in mind from someone who's standing here in front of you with not the best memories that the people that enjoyed that freedom took advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Paul, you'll be the last speaker on this one.
Yeah, I was the first to speak and then I got to hear everyone else speak. So I listened intently, Chief. I understand this is an issue, but riffing off of what Dawn brought to the table, which I actually think is a very good idea and kind of is a meet in the middle. From what Chief said, we're talking hundreds of people is the issue here, which causes traffic into neighborhoods, becomes rowdy, and gets out of hand and needs all the services of the township. So I would support the proposal that Dawn brought to the table, which is that let's allow, you know, our law-abiding, tax-paying citizens who have a private asset on their private land to utilize that to their benefit, while also putting a cap on maybe how many people you can have on a single property, and maybe that's 75. Or another suggestion I had was with the nuisance fines, maybe it could be a tiered system where if you were caught with intent, you know, if they have the paperwork to show that they intended to put on a party for hundreds of people, then similar to like if you were to have a homicide, that's different than a homicide with hatred behind it, right? That's a hate crime, and that carries a much heavier weight when that person goes to court. So I think there's ways to come to a meeting of the minds here without necessarily infringing on those who are doing it responsibly. Do you see that as well? I actually thought that was a very good idea by Dawn, or maybe the tiered system would be a good approach as well. Any
I don't
opinion
agree
there?
with it, so that, I'm not.
I don't agree with it either. I believe that when you have a private asset, you're converting it to a business asset use. The best person to be a judge of the violations is the judge. So I don't think you put a number on it. If somebody is renting out their pool in their backyard, it's a violation of the ordinance. Okay, they go in front of the judge. The judge can say, okay, well, you violated the statute or the ordinance, but I'm not gonna fine you, I'm gonna give you a warning. So I agree with Mr. Marlier, I agree with Mr. Rod. I don't.
Why prohibit it outright? Why take away that opportunity from citizens who would do it responsibly?
I think I was just gonna say, I think one of the keys is if it's a nuisance, because if you're gonna hear the noise and the police is gonna be called, whether it's 20 people or 100 people, it's still a nuisance to the community or the neighborhood.
And you're taking a private property and now making it a business. So to me, that takes it to another level when you're running a business out of your home with insurance and.
Sure,
And
but we just heard
six
from
people
Don
can be-
that 12 residents have been doing so responsibly. And what you're saying is if those 12 now come for a mercantile license, they will be denied because you are prohibiting them from utilizing that private asset.
That's why I think the key is that nuisance part of it,
Yeah.
because if the police is not, if they're not called, I don't know, chief, but if the police is not called, then they're not disturbing the peace.
Yeah.
But, you know, so if they're doing it responsibly, then it's within the law and they can do it then. But if it's not, they shouldn't do it. So it's basically, it's a neighborhood, so it can be a nuisance. If you had a home and you're trying to rest, or you gotta go to work the next day, you might be a nurse or someone who works on weekends, and someone is having a party to 2 o'clock in the morning with a whole bunch of people and they're drinking, that's a nuisance.
I don't
So
have a
whether it's
problem.
20
I don't have
Agreed.
a problem with regulating away, the renting of a neighbor's pool. I don't have a problem. I mean, that's what we're
Neighbors'
talking about, right?
Yeah, so in essence, what this is saying is, I don't have a pool, but if I built one and I created an oasis in my backyard, and I came to Gloucester Township for a mercantile license, I would be denied. Now, if I was already a member of poolshare.com or swimply.com, now I would be operating illegally if I was already a member there, even if I was doing it responsibly. with no effect to my neighbors. I was being a good steward of neighborly respect.
So Paul, you and I aren't going to agree. There's no way. we can agree. I have a pool in my backyard. It would be irresponsible for me to rent out my backyard to some so that they can have a pool party in a neighborhood. That's just.
Do you think it's irresponsible for you to use Airbnb and rent out your home, to use Turo to rent out your car? We're talking about a gig economy, a new economic force here.
We're talking about a neighborhood.
No, we're talking about 200 people with alcohol and other entertainment that is well outside what we're talking about with having 20 people to your backyard for them to have a
Whether
nice
it's 20
time.
people or 100, 20 people can cause the same kind of chaos as 100. Maybe it's, I mean, you don't have the same parking issues, but you could, I guess, I don't know, I have had that issue, so I could see what 20 people can do and the damage they can do at someone's house. And having been the neighbor of that, it's horrible. It's horrible. All for.
So we continue to zoom in on the negative. That's the problem, unfortunately, with these situations, is the positives
If
go.
somebody wants to do that, then the police aren't called, well, okay.
Can I ask two questions? Like Paul mentioned about nuisance, is there any, I don't see anything, but is there anything here saying that there's a nuisance involved and not just someone having 10 people in their backyard? Because this isn't even necessarily just pools. It can be just your backyard. There doesn't have to be a pool. So is there anything in here? I don't see it, but about nuisance.
So the whole purpose of the home occupation ordinance really developed in a lot of the municipalities 20 years ago. We give opportunities to work from home, but puts restrictions on it. If you're a contractor, you don't want cars and trucks walking up the streets, and go through that, there's certain prohibitions that have to be into it. So you always have to be careful when you say, okay, you're allowed to do this, and we're going to regulate it and say you can do it. You don't know where that's going to lead you. You're taking a residential area that's developed and such, and you're allowing an occupation that's not contained inside the home. It's an occupation that's contained outside the home. And whether it's 25 people, 50 people, once you start saying you can do it with 10 people, you can do it with 20 people, I think you get into problems. So it's a type of use in a residential area that's out there. You see it a lot now, but it's creating problems in a lot of towns. And I'll tell you what I said last time, that we talked to the League of Municipalities and to the clerk's office. We checked with a lot of other municipalities that were addressing it. And not one person, not one town or the League of Municipalities said you should get involved in permitting it, and should remain as a prohibition because of problems that you can stand here for hours and debating it. But the best way to do it is to prohibit it. Because you're in a residential area, you need a mercantile license, you need a board of health, you need all these things that are not being accomplished. So if you're putting a stamp of approval and the pool's not being maintained, government has exposure.
That's the second question. Who's paying the fine? The homeowner. So it's not the person having the party.
Imagine it's something imposed on the homeowners.
We hold the home, I know zoning code enforcement holds the homeowner responsible. If I can add one thing. So the issue why I would advise council to not get into putting these things, subjectivity. What I may call as that's being neighborly a nuisance, your definition of a nuisance is going to be, my definition of a nuisance is going to be different from my parents who are 85 years old who live there. Or my definition of a nuisance is certainly going to be different than my 18-year-old daughter who may be using and the things that they carry on. That subjectivity is very difficult to legislate. It's very difficult to make a judgment on. Sure, you could probably get, if your neighbors are all on board with it and they don't mind music, parking, issues like that. But in my experience, that does come into play. And what you would say is subjective to a type of music is a nuisance to me, may not be a nuisance to you. And that runs into issues about the subjectivity. So I would just advise you, the definition of being a nuisance is very hard for us to enforce. It's very hard for us to even, sign a complaint. Like we talked about maintaining a nuisance, it has to hit a pretty high threshold for police to sign a maintaining a nuisance. It's got to be that we're seeing trash, we can prove it, and all kinds of issues, factors that play into it. So I would just tell council, watch that when you start to make, putting things in like neighborly or nuisance without being a nuisance. That is very subjective. The courts find that subjective, and it could be a very difficult thing to enforce and could cause an ordinance to get overthrown or overturned.
Chief, may I just ask, of the 3 incidents that you've brought to our attention here in the township, how many of them met the threshold of a nuisance and are going to court to have their day of justice?
Just one.
Just one. Okay, but they did meet that threshold and they are going to
The one
court.
that was in Poplar Avenue in Blenheim, that was repeated after warnings, things like that, and plus the observations the officers saw was clearly to us. Now, whether they have not had it adjudicated yet in court, the other 2 locations didn't quite meet the threshold, meaning that the officers asked them to disperse the party. They did without too much hassle, if you will, but we still have to stand by and make sure everybody leaves, try and observe, make sure people aren't getting in behind the wheel, intoxicated. Now, again, if you ask me, is that a nuisance? Yeah, it is a nuisance when we have to draw all these police resources in. However, that doesn't necessarily meet the criteria to issue and have probable cause to charge them and then get a conviction in court. So,
and with the Community Affairs Department, did it seem like these latter 2 incidents will not happen again? Because I know the first one was a little standoffish.
We're hopeful.
Okay.
We had positive results, but the first place we also thought we had made it impactful, warnings and whatnot. So we're trying to balance that out. And I can't say this enough. This is about charging money and having a business there. There's no way you can have maintaining a nuisance with your family party if things are getting out and nobody's charged any money. That's a different type of criteria. That would not get our zoning involved with that type of thing. I mean, we've had graduation parties that got out, you name it, weddings, things like that. That happens. And the police are well equipped to deal with that. We get it. That is not what we're talking. We're finding that this trend of trying to make money out of the use of a residential backyard is very taxing to all of us and to the neighbors. And that's my main concern.
Gotcha. Thank you. I won't take up much more time. I guess I'll just make a couple of points. Number one, Councilman Hutchison, I appreciate that you're not in the circumstance where you may need to rent out your pool. But if you did find yourself in hard times and needing to get creative for ways to support your family, I think you would be quite irritated if you recognized that government took away your ability to earn on a private asset on your private land as a private citizen. Don't forget, classical liberalism, which is what this country was founded on, has a strong sovereignty for the private individual and to protect their rights on their land with their private assets.
May I respond?
Sure.
Number one, I bought a house in my neighborhood. There is an unwritten contract requiring me to be a good neighbor. A good neighbor is not somebody who allows their backyard or their pool to be rented out for profit at the expense of the neighbor's quiet enjoyment of their properties. So I disagree. Secondly, you and I have debated the use of eminent domain in the Blackwood area. I am cognizant of the eminent domain aspect of this type of ordinance, but I think that there is a significant difference. I would not use it in Blackwood. We have found alternative ways to accomplish the acquisition of properties that didn't involve eminent domain. I don't believe regulating neighborhood interactions as we're doing in this ordinance is the use of eminent domain. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, I don't quite understand the analogy to eminent domain there, but
We'll talk about it.
yeah, we will disagree there. What I will say is these situations, one is going to court, two others have been handled through community affairs to this point. This would be redundant regulation and it would prevent citizens from utilizing their asset on their land. And I don't think we need this piece of regulation with up to $4,000 in fines in order to handle these situations, because it sounds like they've already been handled. And bad, those of us who operate within the bounds of neighborly understanding, unfortunately, bad actors continue to infringe on our rights because they make, the loudest commotion. And that's what gets your attention. Well, I'm here to tell you that myself and others in this community are law-abiding, tax-paying, and would appreciate it if government doesn't overstep its bounds. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll close that public portion on that ordinance. Do I have a motion for O-22-11? As amended, I'm sorry.
Make that motion.
Do I have a second? Roll call?
Mr. Hutchison,
Yes.
Ms. Grace.
Yes.
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
Mrs. Winters,
Yes.
Mrs. Estrada.
Yes. We now will have a public hearing on ordinance O-22-12. Ordinance amending chapter 63 of the Code of the Township of Gloucester entitled Mercantile Licenses. Anybody wishing to speak? Seeing none, I close that public portion. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second. Roll call?
Mr. Hutchison,
Yes.
Ms. Grace. Yes. Mr. Minio,
Yes.
Mrs. Winters. Yes. Mrs. Estrada.
Yes. We now have the consent agenda. Any council person wishing to remove or any questions, please speak up. Seeing none, do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Roll call?
Mr. Hutchison,
Yes.
Ms. Grace.
Yes.
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
Mrs. Winters.
Yes.
Mrs. Estrada.
Yes. There was a, this is not a GTE Gov question, but this is something that had come in through Mr. Parlemere. It's, he is, oh gosh, let me read the thing. The parents, the whole thing.
We usually would address this at a work agenda meeting, but to have everyone's time on a work agenda meeting on one issue that's very quick, the practice council is usually done. You have a property owner that has property next to their home, which is a separate lot, that they want to, they made a decision to donate it to the township. Now, usually what the governing body has done over many years is if someone comes in with that kind of request, you want to consider it in any fashion. The first thing we do is we ask engineering to do an inspection, see if there's any issues out there, and how, depending on when that comes back, what it says, then the governing body can make a decision to the administration whether or not we should accept that impact. My conversation with the property owner indicated that it's a small lot, can't build on the sides. I seem to recall that it has some kind of valuable frontage that might be an interest to the town. So I said, you can't stop you from sending a letter in, but send a letter into the governing body. We'll address it at a work agenda meeting, and then they can make a decision from there. Rather than take your time at a work agenda meeting, we just go right off now. So if you want to entertain it, you can just ask the engineering independently for approval engineering to go out, just look at the property, see if there's any issues out there.
That's fine.
Yeah, you can do a scroll up to turn it over to engineering just to see what their comments are.
Nancy?
Mr. Hutchison,
Yes.
Ms. Grace.
Yes.
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
Mrs. Winters.
Yes.
Mrs. Estrada.
Yes. We'll now have the public portion. Each person can address council for 5 minutes, up to a 30-minute total public portion. Ms. Smithman?
Good evening, Council. Shaughnessy Smithman, SDK Millbridge Gardens Apartment Complex, Apartment 341. For this public portion, I would like, if I could, to make a request for the different, what is it considered, zoning? For the civil engineering part of the town, to help identify where the local police or the local fire departments are located. Within one city, borough, or township area. It could be any number of fire departments, which are all volunteer, and the local police department can sometimes be difficult to identify for non-emergency situations. For example, I live in a zip code of Clementon, New Jersey as my United States Postal Service address, but I am told that I use not the Clementon Police Department, but I use the Gloucester Township Police Department, located within 300 feet of my apartment door. Previously in the Commerce One Plaza, there was a Laurel Springs United States Postal Service located much closer to my apartment than the Clementon Post Office. It can be quite confusing, and I grew up in the United States. I spent all but 3 weeks in the state of New Jersey. It can be difficult to know where to call or how to contact someone. With regards to people that, as few as there may not have access to a phone regularly, but would still like to contact either the local police or the local fire department. If the town could seriously consider placing on every street sign something to indicate the address for the local police department and the local fire department. If it's a sign in the town, if it's a post and there's a sign that indicates what street you're on that pole or post, place on it the local police and the local fire department that serves that portion of planet Earth. The house right next to it could be a separate fire department. Just wherever that post is, that would get people as close as possible. If you could identify it for people that cannot read or understand the language, if you could identify it with a picture for the police and a picture for the fire department. If you could also place on it in Braille, someone that is blind will know where to find a standardized placement of a street sign. And they would be able to feel and know what police department or what fire department serves that section. If you could write it in raised or recessed writing for people that cannot write, or maybe they don't write the language clearly enough, they could place the envelope or postcard against the plaque and use a piece of chalk, a pencil, even a green leaf. It would be rough, but should be able to get a letter to indicate what's going on to the local fire or the local police department. If you could place it at wheelchair height, that should serve both the people of smaller size, people in wheelchairs, and children. I think it would be very helpful. Just for the very few people that just don't have access to the government, or if they're not from the area, it would be a means other than through technology. Is it at all possible to consider doing that?
Is this the same question that you asked?
I asked it at several meetings, that's correct.
And I think Orlando, President Mercado made it clear that that's not something that we wish to pursue. You're welcome to get up and speak, but that is not something that we wish to pursue.
I just want to make sure there wasn't a variation on the request that you made last time to this time.
What is the request that you recall? So you do recall it being the same?
I wanted to ask you just to make sure.
Just to make sure that I'm making the same request?
Yeah.
Do you quite understand? Because I did make this request several times. At one point, you thought that it would be someone that was blind and in a wheelchair, and why would they need access to the local police or the fire department? Have you come to a better understanding of what it is I'm requesting?
I've listened to you, I don't know how many times, but I just want to make sure. I gave you my decision last time that I wouldn't be supporting your request. I'm gonna stick with that. That's a change.
Well, from what I understand, when you said you were not going to support my request, you said that you were not going to support anything that I brought before the council.
That's not.
No, I believe that was
So
pretty.
if that's what you believe I said, I apologize for giving you the impression that I said. That's what.
Okay, may I ask then, could you please explain to me how you understand my request? What is it that you think I'm requesting?
If I can, Ms. Smithman's 5 minutes are up. I think you're requesting the signs on the poles, and I think that President Mercado has made that clear that that is not something that council wishes to pursue.
How about yourself?
No, I do not. And so therefore, but you are welcome to come up at the meetings during the public portion and continue to speak, but that is not something that we wish to pursue.
Thank you, council.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, good evening, Dina Hendry, Summerdale. I have two things. I recently bought a house in December. I think it would have been really nice if the township would have submitted like a welcome folder of all the important things, like, hey, guess what? Your trash day is this day. Your recycle day is this day. Oh, and by the way, don't put leaves with the grass because they're not going to take them. Those kind of things for a new person coming into the area or never owning a home in this area would have not known those things, like myself or my awesome husband. So something like that, like a welcome packet, like it doesn't even have to be like paper, like physical stuff, but even like an email or something, that would just be really nice and welcoming. The other thing is, I know everybody's entitled to vacation and things happen and people get sick and there is sometimes scheduling issues, but wouldn't you guys like to have a full working council at all times instead of just at like 40% of the time? Full attending, how about that?
Well, every council person at every meeting.
Yes. No?
They can go on vacation.
People can go on vacation. Yeah, absolutely. People can go on vacation. People can get sick. You know, those things happen. But the thing is, okay, but the thing is, you know, you guys are elected, officials, and typically it's about $300 a meeting that you guys get to earn of our tax dollars. And if you don't have members that are here repeatedly and often, it's kind of like robbery almost in a sense, don't you think?
Can I just say something?
Go for it.
I'm actually kind of offended by that.
You can be
Because I
offended. You're within your right.
I'm normally in attendance all the time, and I've missed the last two, and I will share with you, my mother is very ill. And I had to get it was a whole family situation where I had to be hip to hip with my mother for the last 23 days. This is the first night that I've been away from my mother since July 23rd. So every day, all day, she has dementia. She has medical concerns. I'm actually offended because I'm usually here all the time. So
just to claim back my time, I wasn't speaking about you. I know that you're here.
That's
but-
a great example.
No.
You said council.
Council.
You didn't refer to a person. You said
True,
council.
but total. I mean,
Okay,
so
if you're.
Ms. Stubbs, she's
Okay.
attended about 40% of the meetings.
there you go.
Okay?
So be specific.
I mean, I was just trying to be courteous and polite and not, zone in on somebody. But if you would like me to, I kindly can. So Ms. Stubbs, she makes about $329 every meeting. But yes, she hasn't been here. I mean, don't you guys want like your whole team together?
I don't have a problem with you asking that.
Yeah.
I just thought you were saying, hey, each one of us has to be here every single meeting.
No, you're entitled to vacation. You're entitled to get sick. Things do happen. Things do happen. But when it's a repeated occurrence, if that was somebody on my team, I would have been like, sorry, we have to figure something out because it's not fair. Like your back should be hurting for the amount of things that you guys are doing and carrying her.
The other thing too, though, is sometimes things happen in people's lives that
And and understood. And that person then needs to take a step and say, wait a second, I can't fully commit, you know? And it has to be like a two-way street. I think if the public really saw the dollars and was just like, wait a second, my taxes for her are being here and she's not here. How is she my voice and she's still getting paid?
But I will say that she was the voice of some of the people in the audience. She voted against the budget. I think Duke wanted to know her. So when she speaks up, she speaks well. So.
Just saying, it's just.
I can bring it to President Mercado's attention that you were here and brought that up. I have no problem sharing your concerns with him.
I just would like a full council, a full representation. Like I said, I know things happen, people go on vacation, people get sick, but when it's a repeated occurrence, it's not fair. It's not fair for the people. It's not fair for you guys.
Fair question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Coyne?
I'm sorry, sir, go ahead. You go. You speak over. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I want to bring up a very important,
You state your name and your address.
my name is Rob Runquist. I live at 1890 New Brooklyn Airmill Road. My wife is Christine Runquist. We purchased our house in March of 2022, excuse me. And we have an issue that affects a large amount of people. Does anybody on the council have a septic tank? You're so lucky. Okay, I'm going to read this. This is a petition that we have been circulating in the area. I'll read this quickly to you. To whom it may concern, we are the residents of the aerial section of Gloucester Township. We pay taxes. We are submitting this petition to you to ask for your assistance in helping our neighborhood switch over to public sewer with the city septic system that we all have, or if we're in our situation, we don't even have a septic tank. We have a cesspool. A number of us on Aerial New Brooklyn Road that runs from Danbury Road, Devlin Road, all the way down to where the proposed Wawa is going. We all have cesspools. We know that the majority of our township already has public sewer. There are days when our area smells horrendous due to the septic. This is obviously very unhealthy. Many of us cannot even enjoy our own backyards because of it. Why should we be left in this dilemma? It is 2022. We are certain that there are viable solutions. We will do this. We will do what we can on our part and we expect the township to help. We are also aware that Camden County has grant money available to improve housing and make it healthy. We are asking for your help to make this happen. Please respond as soon as possible. So my wife and I, we went around and we had people sign this petition on New Brooklyn Aerial Road, on Garwood Road, on Ariel Clementon Road, which is the border of Gloucester Township and Pine Hill. I have a few pages here of the people that have septic tanks, and I have other people that converted to city. Why? Because they're tired of it. I also have a letter here from Gloucester Township, and it states, this is from the Gloucester Township Municipal Authority. The Gloucester Township Municipal Authority has determined that sewage is not available at the subject's property, which I stated earlier. And it's signed by Raymond Carr from the director of GTMUA. Well, when we did our petition just recently, we find out that right on Ariel New Brooklyn Road, that there are people that have already converted to city sewer. The majority of the people don't even know this. So in closing, I just would like to say that, this has been going on forever. And it's unhealthy. You can't even use your own backyard. This is not just me, this is the people around me. And then you have the other people that have already converted to city sewer. And they're still dealing with the person next door to them on either side of them that are dealing, that still have a septic tank. Might be 40 years old. Believe me, it's no fun. There's a bubbling crude in our backyards and it's not oil.
Is that something, like, can we take that and get that? Because it's not something we can do.
I don't,
That's,
I don't know what Ray's saying, whether he's saying there's a moratorium at this point, whether he's saying that they can connect to it. I know if they connect to it, there's a fee associated with that. I don't know what that fee is.
I would like to say something else. We are parallel with Ariel Clementon, or not Ariel Clementon Road, Ariel Williamstown Road. And I found out that those people, those residents, they have city sewer.
Did you attend the MUA meeting?
I didn't even know there was an MUA meeting.
Yeah, they have regular meetings.
They do? Why didn't he let me know about that?
I don't know. Yeah, they do have regular meetings.
He was very adamant about this, telling me that we can't do this, but we're finding out that we can do it.
I would take it to their meeting where their solicitor is and their engineer.
Do you, if you'd like to leave your number or your email address, I'll get you the information to attend the municipal meetings.
Oh, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Take the information for me, and I'll. Yes. Okay. Anyone else? Jim? Go ahead, Jim.
Good evening, Council. Barry Salvatorello, Hickstown Road, Sicklerville. Just a couple of things. One, Nancy has been absolutely awesome in helping me with my very first concern that brought me to a meeting, which is land being developed 200 feet from my property. I have recontacted New Jersey State DEP. I have been to the clerk's office. There's no information other than the original petition that was filed to the DEP. So I'm just, again, asking for help to find out what they are planning on doing. They have been bringing a backhoe into the property, digging holes and just turning them back over. I can speculate and assume, which isn't fair, but that they're checking the soil to see what it is, because it is all gravel and it is sellable. So again, I don't know what they are doing, but there have been backhoes going in to inspect those properties. And it is 3 blocks and 11 lots. So, but Nancy has been awesome in helping me try to find information, but we're just not getting anywhere. Not through zoning here, not through the developer hasn't put into the permit packet what they're looking to do with that property. So I'm just really trying to find out if the rumor that I heard that a warehouse is going in across from the police shooting range is happening. Because I don't want it to sneak in like other things. And I'll be at every meeting for council, zoning, and planning, and now MUA, because I'm going to keep up on this town, because I want to know what's going on where I live and what my taxes are doing.
Nothing that I'm aware of has come before us yet for review. The only question I guess is, did you hear about this through DEP?
I was notified by mail with certified letter. I responded with certified letter to the DEP. I called, I can't get an answer from anybody at DEP, so I did just write another letter and send it in.
Yeah, a lot of times what will happen is when someone's getting their environmental permits, they're required to notice everybody within 200 feet, but that'll happen before we find out about the project.
No, I understand.
So
I get all that, but now they're bringing backhoes in and digging holes.
Part of their.
And right, but so there's something being planned for it. Now, whether it's gonna be snuck through pit or tried, I shouldn't assume those. So I apologize to the township that something is gonna be snuck through on the residents, because that would never happen.
If it's anything that's gonna come through the planning or zoning board, you'll be noticed because you're within 200 feet. So that under state statute, you have to be noticed of any site plan. So you will know that. There's nothing, again, I'm aware of it's come to us. A lot of times this stuff will happen months, maybe a year before it comes to us.
And Mr. Carlomer just made a good point, that it could be something between the buyer and the seller, that the seller, the buyer might be doing its due diligence to find out if that property would even be worth buying.
But something needs to be brought to the township attention, because just because I do a test doesn't mean what I'm planning on putting there, the township is gonna approve. So somebody's gotta be looking at something somewhere. I mean, is the resident gonna clear 19 acres of land just to haul gravel out from under trees? Somebody's gotta get a permit for that, because I believe any tree larger than 4 inches requires a permit. I could be wrong, but I believe that's the case in this town.
Right now, it might be just a private contract between a buyer and seller. And the buyer has 120 days to do due diligence, for example. And that person, buyer's out there testing soil, whatever else, decide he wants to buy it. Once that happens, and then there's an application that comes out of it, then planning board, zoning.
But until we find out, I will be asking that question at these meetings. And I think that's a fair thing for me to do.
I encourage you, pay attention to what happens on the applications before the boards. So again, you're within 200 feet, so you have to be noticed of any sort.
You got it. Thank you so much, sir. This is a question that I have to address to Mr. Cardis. And this is not meant to become argumentative or anything, but it is a question that I would like answered. At the previous meeting 2 weeks ago, Mr. Sweet was here. Mr. Sweet, I believe is his name, right?
Yeah.
Okay, he brought up the fact that Gloucester Township taxes have gone up 37% in the last 5 years. Talked about Cherry Hill, over the last 10 years, their taxes have gone down, and they're sitting on a $30 million surplus of cash. You made a statement up here, which kind of perplexed me a little bit, and forgive me, because I'm just a construction worker. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a nurse, I'm not anything else. I'm a construction worker. You made a statement up there during that meeting that you said, I know how they do it, and then the subject changed. So I would like to know, why can't we do what Cherry Hill is doing and create a $30 million surplus instead of borrowing $16 million at 2.9% with requirement that we have to pay it all back with no break-in interest?
There's a number of things that they're doing, but the main thing that I see that they're doing is they're estimating their collection on taxes at a much, much lower percentage than what they actually realize. So what happens is, because they're able to do that, they have a larger, what's called reserve for uncollected taxes in their budget. That money gets swept over into a reserve fund, and that's what's building up, in my opinion, if they're looking at their budget, that's what's building up their fund balance. We can't do that. To do that, you'd have to raise taxes even more here.
Please don't.
I believe this all started years ago. I think the county sold them a road, or they got money for a road or something.
But we had a chance in this township to generate revenue, not $1 million over 20 years, but sell bonds, and that Gem Landfill could have been the township solar field, not somebody else's. That could have been a big break to us. The company that $40,000 a year in leases is, unless I misunderstood the meeting, we get $40,000 a year as rent for the land, and the solar panels belong to a private company. Am I incorrect? Please correct me if I'm wrong, because
I did not put that deal together, so don't know.
okay, but I'm asking.
I'd have to look at it. I don't know the intricacies.
I'm asking because $1 million over 20 years is nothing compared to what's being generated by solar panels on that field.
I know that it's a lease deal, and I don't know what the arrangement is.
And there was a 100-year moratorium on it because it is a toxic Superfund site. So I don't even understand how that got through.
They got permissions.
I get it, but I just don't know how. Because I wish I could have gotten it.
They weren't. They went up a little bit, not much.
I don't see them improving schools at all. Or making any extensions, so I was wondering how that.
No.
Is that pertinent to, is that about what we're discussing?
What you're talking about is the municipal portion, the 31% stays for trash, for police department.
Correct, the municipal taxes that, and I'm only going by Mr. Sweet. I haven't had time to research those numbers. And, you know, I know if I brought those numbers to your attention, I would make sure that.
You could go to their website, Cherry Hill's website. They have their audit on there, and you can see what their balance is on their
I was just asking because when you made that statement, I'm like, wow, if he knows how they did it, why can't we do it? So you clarified that statement for me, because I really can't afford my taxes
They
to go
put
up
that in
again.
motion a long time ago. I think it was around the time that there was some type of deal for a roadway or something.
Do we have something here we can sell to the state? How about the golf course before they put factory or warehouses on that?
Interrupt, your 5 minutes is up.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to.
And I appreciate the time from the council. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much. Anyone else? One more speaker. Ms. Coyne?
Denise Coyne, Choose Landing. I have a question regarding the bill list. I'm wondering if Mr. Cardis can tell me what the 2 invoices for Joseph McKernan Jr. were for. The note said undertaking of improved downtown Black.
It's for the corner bank building at Church and Blackhorse Pike.
Right.
We have an agreement of sale. Actually, I think we may have closed on that, correct?
Yes, we are now the owner.
So we own the bank and we own 2 buildings that are attached to the bank. The plan is to tear down the 2 buildings and create a parking area there and to convert the bank into a black box theater.
Right.
That's what McKernan is working.
So do you know what the invoices were for? They totaled $26,500.
Had you contacted me earlier today, I would have pulled them for you.
All right, I just thought you might know.
I'm sure
And
it's just
also-
preliminary work on this. We haven't done any demo or anything yet because we just took ownership.
Okay.
More studies done. The township due diligence period before we completed the closing.
Yeah, we had to have environmentals and things.
So who signs off on these invoices when they come in for payment?
As far as the vouchers,
Right.
purchaser, I would sign off.
Okay, so if they're up for payment, you signed off on them, right?
Correct.
Okay. Also, I wanted to ask in regards to the gentleman's conversation about the solar panels on the landfill, and you're saying you don't know much about the deal. Don't you anticipate that income if there's a signed deal for a lease? It's something that generates,
Just went into effect recently.
so,
I would not have anticipated that in this budget, no.
okay, so how long after normally when a deal is made do you anticipate that
I
revenue?
would think that we would be looking at that for the 2023 budget.
But aren't they paying money now?
Yeah.
Aren't they paying rent now?
Yes, and any money that would come in would go to miscellaneous revenue, not anticipated.
It goes to miscellaneous revenue.
Yes, you
So-
cannot go in and create a revenue line item once you've adopted your budget. You can
Okay, but when that-
You can bring in an appropriation under chapter 159, but you can't bring in a revenue. It's not permissible. You didn't
Okay.
put it in, you didn't put it in the beginning, when the budget was introduced and finally adopted, it doesn't go in this budget.
Okay, but when that money comes in, you don't know how much money's coming in?
I don't know off the top of my head what the stream is now.
Okay,
Had you contacted me earlier, as you usually do, my email,
I just heard this conversation and the question just came into my head, so I figured I'd ask.
I will get an answer. I don't have it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll close this public portion. Polling of directors.
Mr. Barlow.
Nothing to report.
Mr. Curtis.
Nothing to report.
Mr. Petrangelo.
Nothing.
Chief Harkins.
Nothing to report.
Mr. Jarwell. Mr. Hutchinson.
Thank you for coming.
Ms. Graves.
Thank you for coming in tonight. Have a
Mr. Mignon.
Thank you all for coming, and everyone be safe going home.
Mrs. Winters.
Thank you everyone for coming. Have a great day.
Mrs. Strato.
A couple things here. The Gloucester Township Movie Night is Friday, September 9th at the park. It's Sonic 2. And September 24th, the drive-in at Camden County College is Hocus Pocus. And lastly, the Gloucester Township Historic and Scenic Preservation Committee is taking part in a global celebration and collaboration of unity with 12 like-named Gloucester communities throughout the United States and abroad. This is on September 3rd. It's called Inaugural Global Gloucester Day, and it began in 2017 in England, and we are bringing it to Gloucester Township on September 3rd at 10 a.m. There's a ribbon cutting ceremony that will take place at Gabriel Davies Tavern, and the ribbon cutting will dedicate the newly installed walkway on the trails to the north branch of Timber Creek and Otter Branch. The Gloucester Township Rotary Club Foundation funded through grants. And after the ribbon cutting, there's guided history walks along the trail and grounds will be conducted, and everything concludes at noon with the ringing of bells throughout Gloucester Township and around the world in the global Gloucesters. And the event is free and all are welcome to attend. Thank you. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make that motion.
Do I have a second? Meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. Have a good night.
One of our bikes? Where's it at?